You are about to start your return to work journey. Please listen to this short instructional podcast before heading straight to the podcasts. All the podcasts have been designed using the red, amber and green zone theory used by A Stroke of Luck. Many stroke survivors have already heard of this theory and use it within their everyday. But if you haven't, here's a little explanation so you can follow the podcast.
The red, amber and green paint stroke used by A Stroke of Luck is a visual representation of how a stroke survivor may be feeling at any particular moment. It may be linked to your mood, your fatigue, your mobility, challenges you are facing, or even how anxious you're feeling. Many use the theory to explain their fatigue. For example, when you're in your green zone, you may be able to complete everyday activities as you did pre-stroke. Even with impairments, you have adapted these activities within your rehabilitation. However, when you reach your amber zone, these activities may become a little bit more challenging. You may notice changes, like your speech may be slower, or any impairments you have may become more obvious and impacting. When you reach a red zone, your impairments may halt you in your tracks and limit your ability to do the things that you would like to do. You may not be able to communicate effectively, or your movements may become limited. You can use this theory to communicate the effect of any of the challenges you are facing whilst recovering from your stroke, and how your impairment may change throughout the day in how you present.
Within the podcast, we also discuss using your A-team. The A-team simply refers to the people around you that you need within your recovery for support. The survivor, you, are captain of the A-team, and you have to play to the strengths of the team. Whether that's family, therapists, doctors, charities, or people you work with. You decide when and how to bring those team members in when you need them for support. Podcast 1, designed around the red zone, is for survivors who are unsure whether they are ready to return to work, are unaware of the resources available to help their return to work journey, or want advice on services out there that can support their return to work journey. Join us as we discuss preliminary thoughts about returning to work post-stroke, featuring insight and experience from Romy Curtis, an inspiring lady who has returned to work post-stroke. You may wish to listen to this podcast in a quiet room for contemplation. This podcast details important resources you can access to start your return to work journey. You may wish to note down some of the information given within this podcast.
Podcast 2, designed around the amber zone, is for survivors who are aware of services out there to support their return to work journey, are within the self-acceptance zone of their recovery, are prepared to be honest and open about their limitations, and have insight into the symptoms of their stroke. This podcast is a journey of self-discovery. During this podcast, you will be guided through 2 self-assessments that will enable you to identify the starting point of your return to work journey. For this podcast, you will need a copy of your job description and to download resources 1 and 2 and have access to the examples provided. You can either print these off, if you have a printer, or alternatively, copy the resources by hand.
Podcast 3, designed around the green zone, is for survivors who have completed podcast 2 and understand the challenges they will face when returning to work. And they're also prepared to communicate ways in which their employer can support them. Join us as we discuss how to communicate your needs to your employer. For this podcast, you will need the 2 self-assessments you completed in podcast 2. You will also need to print resource 3 if you have a printer. Alternatively, download the editable PDF and edit the resource online. Please listen to all 3 podcasts in order, as each one has an important message you will need for a safe, sustainable return to work. The podcast miniseries details support available only within the UK, so if you are listening outside of the UK, please refer to your local guidance. Thank you for listening to this short instructional podcast.